Uh, Listen, I wrote prescriptions for over 35 years, and I honestly didn't have time to look at something like what we're going to talk about tonight. I had no chance to. Working 14-hour days, 6 days a week. I mean, I was on a treadmill. It wasn't a good place to be. And, doing that for as many years, I was wearing out. 2 days, this is 4 years now ago, almost. A call came for my daughter. We had just seen her family for Christmas. Wonderful time. 2 days later, I'm getting ready to see my first patient in the morning. And I'll never forget the call. I feel the call from her. She says maybe 2, 3 sentences about one of her kids, Gideon, and at the time he was 13 years of age. And she gets about 2 or 3 sentences out. I say, honey, let me interrupt. You need to get him in the car right now. You need to drive as fast as you can safely drive him to the nearby pediatric emergency room, which is 15, 20 minutes from their house, and get him there now. Get him there now. She did that. Within 2 hours, after some preliminary tests, they had transferred him to my alma mater, Duke. Now, folks, you do not want to be the star patient at a university teaching hospital. Well, he was for 5 weeks. And at the end of the day, he almost acted like somebody who had a stroke, kind of. He couldn't swallow, he couldn't walk well at all, and he couldn't speak.
Yeah, was he really active prior to all of this?
Oh yeah.
I mean, was he?
Yep, he was a cross-country runner. He was extremely active, a brilliant young guy, and basically they couldn't come up with a causative situation, and they had no treatment plan, really, just rehab and hope that he gets better. So that's where they were for the next several months. Because there was no traditional answers. They started looking on the internet. They started looking at all sorts of supplements. I call it, lotions, potions, and contraptions. They did all sorts of things. They're running out of money. And so about that time, through providential, one person telling another person, ASEA found its way to them. Redox signaling molecules found its way. It stayed in their pantry, I found out, for at least several weeks, but finally they pulled it out because nothing's working. And within 3 to 4 weeks, amazing things started happening for Gideon. And it was profound. And I'll fast forward to my connection with Dad. So they called, we were going to have a birthday party. They have a family of 10 kids. And we were celebrating a couple of the kids' birthdays. And she told me, Anna said, hey, look, Dad, something's helping Gideon. I can't believe it, but it is. Would you mind hearing about it? And I said, no, why would I mind hearing about it? So we go to the birthday party, and Ed and Rebecca Weens were there. Now, I never met them. And then this guy, Dr. Dick Walker, was on the screen up there. And he zoomed in. And so I heard about this Redox Signaling Science. And, it was mentioned several times. And I'll remember sitting on the sofa where I would always play with my grandkids, except I sunk really deep into that sofa because I didn't want anybody to ask me about this science. Because quite honestly, as Dr. Osler said, we're not young birds, we're old birds. And all this science, explosion in redox signaling science, has really happened in the last 15 or so years, okay? And when you're a busy practitioner, you're busy. If you're not in academic medicine doing, research, I just didn't have time to look at basic sciences, just didn't, And so, but I'm going to tell you, that evening, I decided several things. Number one, and I heard about this network marketing stuff, and I didn't really understand that. And I tucked that away, put a little bookmark on it. But what I did come away with was, number one, my grandson was improving when nothing, and my traditional medicine had no answers. And I felt impotent as a grandpa, but also a doc. I had felt impotent up to that point, and I could see he was improving. Things were happening. His locomotive skills, ability to walk, was, markedly improving. Uh, Verbal skills were improving. His ability to swallow, things that we just take for granted, really, honestly. I mean, here's a kid who had to get a feeding tube placed in his stomach before he left his hospital care. So, these things came back cognitively, high executive skill levels. That took a lot longer. And so, so not everything came along at the same time. Okay. And number two, it involved a science. And I thought, whoa, well, it involves some science. That's interesting. Now, I didn't know anything about this science. So I spent, I felt like Paul. I went off into hibernation a little bit. And for the next 3 or 4 months, I just kind of bought textbooks and started reading about this as much as I could. And I just came away just really, I guess, mesmerized, flabbergasted, like, wow, why, how something this important, how could I not have kept up with this? But, again, we're all very busy practitioners. And that's something for everybody on this call to understand. If your doc is brand new out of their training, 5, 6, 7 years, they just graduated from the residency program, then they're going to know something about redox signaling molecules. But if they're much older, folks, we have lives to live, and we're not going to be steeped in basic science unless we have a need to be there. Okay. But I felt this need because of what happened in my kids' lives, my grandkids' lives. So honestly, that's how I got started in this. Now I've grown in my knowledge of this field of biochemistry. This is a field of science that is absolutely astounding. We're on the tip of an iceberg in terms of knowledge base, and for those that are on this call, and you can see the background, look behind Dr. Osler. You see that book back there? That Redox Matters book. Now, that's a book that I purchased just a little while ago, and I'm loving it, by the way, Dr. Lee. I'm going to let you know. It's excellent. This is a field of science that is exploding. If there are any grad students or wannabe grad students on the call tonight, you need to do something in the redox field, because, there are going to be more Nobel Prizes there. And now let me just mention, because that was a few years ago, right? Let me fast forward to today.
But my question for your grandson is, if you were seeing such remarkable results in 3 weeks, I'm just going to assume that there was no less than 4 ounces a day, more likely 8 ounces, just because that's what I saw with Jim. He saw, immediate results, or he saw results fairly quick with 8 ounces. Was that the amount? Do you know if that was the amount they started from day one for 3 weeks where you saw a change? Were you?
It's my understanding, talking to my daughter, that they actually started, I think, more slowly, 2 to 4 ounces. And then they did eventually ramp it up. Now, I think now he is actually taking half a bottle a day. Folks, don't look for this to be aha within a week, because you'd be in the vast minority. I mean, 15% is as powerful as what Dr. Osler said this is. Only about 15% of users will have that moment in a week of using it. Okay. Now, it's great if you're that 15%, right? You have validation early. Hey, I can take this stuff. It's the wow. But you're in the 15% minority. Okay. By a month, it's probably more like 50%. But you know, if you stop it at 1 month, it's like a lot of the medicines I prescribe, quite honestly. Again, other than maybe antibiotics, which can have a rapid response that's visible and measurable, you know, most of the things we do take at least a month. And many of the things that I use pharmacologically, you know, I ask the patient to bear with us for 2 to 3 months before we can see a measurable effect. So again, getting back to the ASEA story, you know, at 2 months of usage, you know, your response rate is probably, you know, around 75%. People will say, my goodness, this is helping my X, Y, and Z, you know.
Yeah.
And by 3 months, it's probably about 90%. Now, you know, 90 is not 100. I'm so blessed that somebody introduced him to this, something that I knew nothing about. But folks, you could also introduce friends that may have challenges to it too. And you don't need to write a prescription for it. And I think, you know, in a very simplistic way, we can look at our cells that make up our organs and the organ systems. And, you know, we can look at these cells and say, are they getting the signal, the proper signaling to do their jobs in an optimal way? And whatever the function of the cells is, you know, whether it's cells in your liver, cells in your brain, cells in your kidneys, it doesn't really matter, because in the biochemistry, it requires good signaling to optimally function. And so, you know, I guess in a simplistic way, Jim, you don't need to be a rocket scientist, a nuclear physicist, maybe to have come up with this stabilized thing. You needed to be one, but not to tell other people about it. So if people can understand the importance of signal with a cell phone, if you have 4 bars of signal, what happens if you go down to 1 bar of signal? Now this incredible technology is somewhat limited. And in fact, it may become almost not useful to you. So you have to have this working piece of instrumentation, but without signal to augment what it's got built into it already, it's going to have difficulties performing to its capabilities. Now, for me as a practitioner who is steeped in wanting to know, and I like to know backgrounds and so forth, it took probably 3 to 4 months before I really started to understand this better. But folks, you can share this, right? You know, you could share this tomorrow with somebody, because you could just point them in the direction of some helps, some videos. And I can tell you, this stuff is incredible.